Thank you so much for your attention. Without further ado, I think we're ready to dig in. I'd like to introduce the first panel topic for today, Leading Advanced Air Mobility in Michigan. We will soar into the exciting world of aerial mobility and explore the ways that Michigan is at the forefront of advancing this revolutionary technology. Panelists, please take the stage, introduce yourselves, and take us on a magic carpet ride.
Good morning, everyone. There we go, a few people there. My name is Chris Girdwood. I'm with the Detroit Region Aerotropolis. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing us all together today in Ann Arbor, Spark, and Washtenaw County. So at the Detroit Region Aerotropolis, we're a two-county, four-community economic development partnership that builds opportunities to support airport operations at DTW and Willow Run. And we lean on Ann Arbor, Spark, and Washtenaw County for their expertise as we start to grow the high-value cargo operation at those two airports. So to introduce this panel of advanced air mobility, when you look at our region, you've got great interstate freeways, you've got the 18th busiest airport in North America, Willow Run, you've got Class A rail lines, but let's talk about low-altitude airspace. It's part of the intermodal transportation network that we just haven't leveraged yet to help our customers move high-value cargo to where it needs to go. And so we need to think about the vernacular, the words, and so you have LANC, Low Altitude Authorization and Notification Capability, AAM, Advanced Air Mobility, UAM, Urban Air Mobility, UTM, traffic management capabilities in low altitude airspace, eVTOL, VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing, sustainable aviation, all of these new terms and how they're guiding conversations and how investors are thinking about those terms in new ways, where to park their money to make sure that there is some sort of return on investment as we commercialize these new technologies. And so I'll ask the panel to take a few pieces of these new terms and how they relate to the industry they're in specifically as they introduce themselves. And I'll start with Danny here to talk about the technology they're developing and maybe some of those terms and define those terms for us to help us understand this new space we're in.
Yeah, thank you very much. For everyone who has not met me before, my name is Danny Ellis, the CEO and co-founder of a local company called SkySpecs. SkySpecs, we are crossing over multiple parts of, this new terminology of mobility and also the electrification. We started a company in 2012 trying to use, as you can see on the screen here, autonomous drones to inspect the health and operational capability of wind turbines. The wind industry is a pivotal part of our electrification future with renewable energy, and as it turns out, they don't last forever. And so we built a technology to autonomously help maintain these things. What is interesting, though, is we came up, actually the project started in 2009. Drones and the commercial use of them wasn't legal until 2017. So we had many years of exploring and trying to push the boundaries with the FAA, with local governments, international governments, on how to actually operate. And all these terms you just threw out, all the acronyms that the aerospace industry loves to throw at everybody, we were helping to try to create them, and it was very slow. And so the one thing I wanted to start off with today, just to kind of expand everyone's mind, and everybody here, I'm probably the least directly touching this industry as it relates to aerial mobility. Like, we're only on wind farms. We don't go anywhere else. Where the other three panelists here are working very broadly in the airspace. But the thing I want to kick off with is advanced air mobility doesn't just mean flying cars. And for the longest time that we were coming up trying to create technology, we were being stopped from operations because the flying car hadn't been perfected yet. And every time you went to the FAA and tried to talk about it, like, oh, this is dangerous stuff. And it's like, it wasn't that dangerous to go fly a drone on a wind farm. And so the rest of the panelists here, they are all working on amazing technology to expand a tremendous number of applications in our low airspace, low altitude airspace, that is not a flying car. So I just wanted to once again expand the definition of what we're talking about today, and hand it over to the other panelists here.
Awesome. My name's Michael Helander. I'm co-founder and CEO of Airspace Link, and we just moved our headquarters into Michigan Central, the book depository building, kind of to be that hub of future mobility, but in the air. So very exciting for us to be one of the first companies to move down there. And I think we're one of those quiet companies that we're not a manufacturer, we're a software company. But we've raised about $37 million here in Detroit, so that's pretty big in the sense of capital. A lot of that came from AAA Insurance. Some of the largest air traffic control companies in the world has started investing in our company here in Detroit. So pretty exciting that we have that. What we do is think of us as the easiest way to describe the Google Maps for drones, but the roads don't necessarily exist yet. So we are working with the federal government, FAA. We have a contract with them. We're USS. We're approved company to authorize flights here in the United States. So we help build like the federal highway system. We work with states to start to integrate the state policies and system into the software, right down to the cities and how they're using the technology. But when we think about AAM, we look at it from the very simplest and work our way back. So we have a framework that we developed with company AUVSI, Commercial Drone Alliance, National League of Cities, that helps integrate drones at all levels. So level one would be recreational pilots. How do we fly safely? What do they need to get to fly? There's a trust exam that you take if you want to fly recreational, and we have a system to approve that with the FAA. And then you get to level two, which is Part 107, commercial pilots, which a lot of your pilots are probably commercial. They require a license to fly for money, have different rule sets that they can fly under. We can push them to fly at night, further coordination with airports, and we provide the software and systems to do that. And then you get into level three, which gets into tactical beyond visual line of sight for public safety and drones as a first responder, COAs that allows governments to do certain operations. And then we're working up with UPS as one of our customers to create areas of operational approval for what's called Type 135 beyond visual line of sight flights for package delivery, and that is happening in North Carolina. So if you can imagine the complexity all the way up to air taxis with people in it, that's level 6. A lot more complicated, much larger infrastructure systems that need to go in. So we're the infrastructure and data systems to help integrate drones into our national airspace, but also into our communities at scale here in Michigan too.
I think we may have sat in an awkward order. Eric, do you want to go first? Because I think your slides are up next.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, hi everybody. Eric Muir. I am the CTO and founder of Valar Technologies. We're an aerospace software and perception-focused company that's developing situational awareness, safety, and advanced automation technologies for both aircraft of today, and then also, as I have here on the right side of the slide, just the additional modalities and vehicles that are being envisioned. And really the purpose of this motivation for our company, and I think really a lot of the discussion here, is all about how do we scale the use of our national airspace. We have a finite amount of surface mobility paths, but when you look up into the sky up to 60,000 feet, there's a lot of space there and a lot of opportunity. And so how do we kind of advance beyond this more legacy transportation model that we have that flies hub to hub with very large aircraft, and doing so very efficiently and safely, but maybe underserving certain sectors of the market or of the population. And so in light of all of that and all the excitement around these new applications of aerial mobility, whether it's drones or urban air taxis or regional air mobility solutions, and quite frankly, even all of the excitement in the commercial aerospace, how do we continue to scale and continue to leverage this national airspace in a way that's maintains the safety record that we're all very accustomed to? We go to Detroit Metro, hop on an airplane, we arrive at our destination. It might not be the most stress-free, but we don't really stress out about the safety of that. And so our company is, looking at the pressures of the existing ecosystem, but also of the future ecosystem, and understanding that there are a lot of technologies that really are born out of even the automotive mobility that is rooted here in Michigan that can be advanced into the aviation space, and eventually lead us to situations where we can address pilot shortage. We can fly into more regional airports that have lacking infrastructure relative to these large airport hubs, or maybe don't have the air traffic control infrastructure that those hubs have. So I think it's a very exciting space. I think it's a critical component, and I think it really plays to, what is AAM. In my mind, it's really an initiative on how we scale the use of this national airspace, both from a vehicular standpoint, but also from a software, infrastructure, and technology standpoint.
Awesome, thanks. Everyone, Ben Marchiona. I work for a company called Electra.aero, and I'll introduce Electra a little bit more in a minute. But if we could start with the next graphic real quick up on the screen. Yeah, if we could pop that up there. So this is a graphic from NASA, and what I wanted to do is sort of lay out the ecosystem that encompasses advanced air mobility. And you can see a whole lot of things here. So advanced air mobility isn't just air taxis, as you may have heard of them, or drones or things like that, but it's this huge ecosystem of lots of different technologies all working together. It started with small drones, and then it evolved into things like urban air mobility. That's where the air taxi part came in. And then it evolved further to say, okay, to be able to do that, you need this unmanned traffic management system that Chris had alluded to. So basically, how do you manage potentially thousands of these small aircraft all operating in the national airspace? And so I want to really drive home the point that AAM, Advanced Air Mobility, touches a lot of different things. So as you look at this graphic here, you'll see airplanes flying between existing airports. You'll see new electrified aircraft entering your more urban environments, but doing so in a much more environmentally friendly way, a much more community friendly way in terms of being far quieter than if you were to, say, land a helicopter on the top of a parking garage today. And you'll also see some aspects of drones. So the drones working within the system, perhaps doing wildfire management or traffic monitoring, something like that. And certainly things like the Amazon Prime Airs, the zip lines of the world, delivering packages to your house. A lot of these things are enabled by electrification, but it's not exclusively electrified aircraft. The electrification essentially allows you to design some of these aircraft systems in a different way that you had before, but there are still aspects of the advanced air mobility ecosystem that go beyond or are not actually electrified. If we could switch to the next slide then, I wanted to at least give you a sense of what the company that I work for, Electra, is doing. So we're developing hybrid electric airplanes. And this looks a little bit different than maybe some of the air taxi types that you've seen in the past, but this is what we call an eSTOL aircraft. So eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing, that's literally like a helicopter. For us, STOL means short takeoff and landing. So rather than taking off from a specific point, that is a very energy intensive process if you want to be able to do that sort of hover footprint. But if you leverage just a little bit of distance on the ground, in our case, we think of like soccer field operations. So a 300-foot by 100-foot space, you can deliver about 3 times more payload for the same cost, complexity, if you will, of aircraft. And we go after a hybridized version of that airplane, not all electric, because in aviation, it's a really challenging problem to come over the energy density of batteries today. Works great for cars in the way that cars are used, but for aviation, the energy density in, say, jet fuel is nearly 100 times more than what you can get out of the best batteries today. And in airplanes, weight matters a lot. And so you have to find creative ways of leveraging those systems. So when you can do that, hybridization is a great way to start for aircraft solutions that aren't just going a few tens of miles of range. So if you want to connect more underserved rural communities, like Electra wants to with our airplane, and you want to go maybe a couple 100 miles, you'll need some aspect of hybridization rather than just all electric, at least as far as the technology goes today. So an airplane like this one, I mentioned, can land in and out of soccer fields. Think of the big house just up the road. You can get this airplane in and out of there. This is our 2-seat technology demonstrator. So this aircraft is actually on track to fly, achieve first flight in 2 weeks. We've been building it for about 2.5 years, and so it's almost ready to fly now. And this will be the tech demonstrator for the full-scale 9-passenger aircraft that we expect to enter into service in 2027. So that is, but I at least wanted to show you the airplane. So the 9-seater is basically a bigger version of this aircraft. So in the context of Michigan, what an airplane like this could do is, say, take off from the Ann Arbor Airport just down the road, fly well into the UP, let's say Mackinac Island. You could land on the runways that are there if you want, but you could also access areas that don't have the infrastructure like an airport in the first place. So if you've got a space that's roughly the size of a soccer field, you can get in and out of that space very quietly. You're not using leaded fuels like a lot of general aviation aircraft still use today, very health hazardous. This aircraft in particular is completely compatible with SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel. It's sort of a relatively net zero version of jet fuel. A lot more expensive, but allows you to at least bring down some of the carbon emissions as you get there. And then I mentioned the quiet, which is what's really important part of electrification. And even with a hybrid aircraft, you can basically turn off the turbine when you're getting closer to the communities where you want to get quiet. And then once you're up in the air and you're far away, you can turn on that turbine, and that's what gets you the range to actually connect into the more rural parts of, say, the state of Michigan. So that's my intro to Electra, but looking forward to the conversation today. Thanks.
And I would like to be that first passenger in 2 weeks.
You got it, Chris.
This guy right here. So let's bring it home and let's talk about Michigan. What is Michigan doing well in this space, and where are the challenges that we could overcome? I know previous panelists mentioned North Dakota, North Carolina, and we're in a competitive environment. Economic development is a competitive sport. Let us know where we're winning and where some of the challenges are.
I'll start. Aerospace Link helped conduct the UAS integration and feasibility for the state of Michigan with MDOT Aeronautics Group, and just published that document over to MDOT. And one of the things that's happening that they're doing well, at a certain pace is, one is I think we've had operations running in different ways, from what SkySpec's doing to supporting your teams and the investments that's happening. We've also had investment from MEDC and Office of Future OFME to support Beaumont to do medical delivery between hospitals, so that some of what I call the demand gen, where they got operations up and running between Birmingham and Royal Oak of test kits. When you get your blood taken, and it's taken between for weeks on end, and we didn't even publish it that much. We had Gulf operations, city of Taylor, city of Romulus, Lansing. These cities are starting to integrate drones and what I call creating the demand gen. We actually have some automotive companies looking at parts delivery between their supply chain. So that's been happening. I call that the activation and demand gen, and that's happening through, like I said, MEDC and a few other groups. And then at the state level is how do we scale that? Because a lot of those operations are happening under current rule sets. And Michigan has, if you've seen, 17 million has gone through legislation here that I think 7 million of that is being set aside for Battle Creek. I don't know all the details of that, but for Drone Park. So an investment in the infrastructure and systems to support advanced air mobility. And then another 10 million to support the scaling of the operations. Because when you're running operations between hospitals, you still need a visual observer. And some of the things that we've learned up in North Dakota and North Carolina and out in Dubai, where we're deploying in Ecuador, is sense and avoid systems and the infrastructure to support these operators. How do we make digital visual observers and integrate drones safely? Well, there's a few key things, and we're finding a bit of a blueprint. And that is, how do I know if my drone is flying that there's not a helicopter coming through beyond my visual line of sight? How accurate are those radar systems? What is the speed of the data coming off of those? And that's where we're looking for the state of Michigan, and they are too. An RFP is coming out to support the infrastructure that the state will pay for, that operators then can connect to, and then get their approvals with the FAA. So that's something that Michigan is on a really good path right now. It just is going to take a year or two till these systems start to get in place. So very exciting things happening, in some cases quietly within the state.
Eric, I was talking with Greg at M-City, and he mentioned that if we give you a big round of applause, you'll move your company to Michigan.
Michigan Central.
So Eric,
Or Ann Arbor.
What can we do better to recruit a company like you to come back to Michigan?
Yeah, just a little bit of context there. I grew up north of Ann Arbor and went to school here at University of Michigan. Studied in the aerospace department, which is a phenomenal aerospace department. I think several of us are all graduates there. But one thing I found and the reason I left the state initially is there's actually fairly short number of aerospace specific technology companies here in the state. So I started my career out on the West Coast. At Boeing, you could probably pick any city, big city on the West Coast or even the East Coast and find more aerospace opportunities than here in the state. But that said, I think in the time that's passed even since I graduated, there's been a tremendous transition. I think from Michigan being the motor state, motor city in Detroit to really kind of embracing more of this mobility mindset. And I think a lot of the foundations have been put in place because of the autonomous vehicle, the connected vehicle space for automotive that's now kind of ripe to leverage into the aerospace and aviation sectors. And I see a lot of the right pieces there, and I think that just the shifting of the mindset and the investment in how can we help catalyze some of these technologies and these companies pursuing them to leverage what's here from a workforce standpoint and infrastructure standpoint is really key, and kind of continue to shake off the automotive only kind of branding of the state. And there's great evidence of that. My company is working with the OFME to kind of do some pilot initiatives. I know there's some more investments at Battle Creek that have made their way into the mobility ecosystem here. And so I think it's just it's promising where we're at, and we just have to keep kind of focusing that and making that part of the narrative.
Danny?
Oh, go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I was just going to add real quick. So our company, we were told to leave in 2012. It was the early days of drones and electrification and all of that. And most of the mentors we met in this very hotel when we were going through our Spark boot camp said, if you want to get to that technology, you got to go out west. Most of us, to Eric's point, and Eric, Ben, and I all went to school together, same exact time. And all of our colleagues left. And a few of us that stayed behind were either naive or who knows, but we all had families here and we didn't want to leave. And so we said, no, we're going to be a little boneheaded and stay. Fast forward a few years, and all of a sudden with the autonomous car industry, the technology was the same. The same sensors, the same software, the same testing criteria. And then all of a sudden people were like, oh, it's amazing you put your company in Ann Arbor so strategically around the autonomous car industry. And I was like, yeah, that wasn't it at all. We just wanted to stay here. But like we were fighting for the same sensors as Ford was trying to take off the market. Ben was critical. So Ben used to work at SkySpecs as well, for those that don't know. We needed to build 6 drones, and we needed 6 laser systems. And Ford invested in the LiDAR company that we were buying from and literally bought everything so that GM couldn't get it. And we couldn't get it either. So we were like calling our friends in the auto industry. We're like, will you just sell us like 5 or 6 of these things? It's all we need. We had to sign some paperwork that we weren't going to resell it to GM just so we could put it on a drone. But fast forward to today, and like I said, that infrastructure around the engineers at these companies and the technology behind it, it is still very rooted in automotive, but with electrification and with autonomy, they're bridging gaps to many, many industries. And I think to Eric's point, that is helping us, not be just the automotive state. And to Ben's prior point, everything in the air needs to be lightweight. And so usually the combustion engine versus aerospace, those are 2 vastly different worlds. Now you're looking at battery manufacturers, as Lieutenant Governor stated, and we both need those sets of batteries. The renewable energy industry needs them, aviation needs them, auto needs them, and we all need the same chipsets and the same sensors. So I think a lot of that is bringing those industries together.
So I think there's a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Michigan to expand beyond just ground-based mobility. Ground-based mobility is obviously incredibly important, not just to the state, and there's lots of really interesting advances being made. But that once-in-a-generation opportunity comes from going into the 3rd dimension of mobility, if you will, and also expanding some of the maritime mobility opportunities in the state. These all drive back to that electrification theme that I was talking about earlier. The reason that, for example, a lot of the Michigan Aerospace Engineering grads find themselves leaving the state. I was just like Eric. I went to the West Coast for a few years, and then Danny had started SkySpecs, and so I actually moved back to Michigan because there was one of a small number of aerospace-related opportunities in the state to come back, and then I stayed. I'm now working for Electra based in the Washington, D.C. area, and it'd be really cool to have an ecosystem based in the state of Michigan so I don't have to commute to D.C. every other week. That'd be really excellent. But the point there is also that by being aggressive about establishing a new industry in the state, that opens up a lot of opportunity, not just to keep graduates here, but also to bring them home. For a lot of our friends, I think, would be happy to move back to Michigan if that ecosystem existed for them to be able to move here and work doing, in our case, the aviation side of things. And that's not to say that aviation isn't in Michigan. There's a lot of big supply chain related companies lower in the aviation supply chain rather that are here. However, the electrification is unique because you no longer have that embedded supply chain base in the traditional areas of aviation. So the West Coast, parts of the Southeast, Texas, et cetera. The reason that it's hard to get a big aerospace company to move is because all of their suppliers are already in that space, all the talent for how you design airplanes conventionally. Electrification and everything that I showed you on the AAM chart, it's all new. None of those suppliers are in those areas. It's batteries, autonomy, electric motors, things like that. And also production at scale, things that conventional aviation, that none of those are in those typical ecosystems. And so that's why it's a once in a generation opportunity for the state to be really aggressive about figuring out how to spark that ecosystem here and lay the foundation to bring or have founded companies in the state of Michigan. Just yesterday, perhaps the biggest player in the electric vertical takeoff and landing space, Joby Aviation, announced that they were going to be building a production facility in Ohio at the Dayton airport. Joby's going to be investing $500 million with $325 million in additional state grants, 2,000 jobs, and establishing that in Dayton. That's, I think, a big missed opportunity for the state of Michigan. But the silver lining is that there's a lot of other companies like Joby that are similarly looking to say, hey, maybe the West Coast isn't the most effective place to start an industry like this. And I think that Michigan is so well poised to become that ecosystem. And for that one weekend a year where we're not as friendly with that state down south, I think that we've got a really good opportunity to become that ecosystem instead of just places like Ohio.
Yeah, that was tough information to see yesterday because we did fight for that. Michigan did fight for that opportunity, and we are in the running. So it is a bummer, and things that aren't going well, that's one that's probably not going well because we pushed hard as a state. But one of the things that we probably need to do better is if we're going to be serious about it, like we need someone that wakes up every day, and whether it be a UAS or AAM program office or whatever that might be, there needs to be something like that. And I think it's spread across OFME, MEDC, different groups, and I just think that's what we need to help have a common message because it was a bit of running around. So I think that's something to take away that we could do better is someone that wakes up every day.
Appreciate that. Message received. So let's talk about your customers because I think when I thought about advanced air mobility 4 years ago when I first started down this journey, it was my grandparents receiving their prescriptions via drone. But that's just not the case. I think you all work for high-growth startup companies. You had to go through a customer discovery process so your investors could understand where the return on investment would be once their capital was placed into productive use. And so talk about your customer. Who is your customer? How do you connect with your customer? And in the state of Michigan, how can we help you find more customers so you can grow more rapidly here in the state of Michigan?
Yeah, I guess I could start. We can maybe just go down the line. It's a great question, and I don't know that I've finished the customer discovery. I think that's probably an ongoing thing. But one thing I alluded to in kind of my opening is that the aerospace industry and aviation is ripe for new technology solutions now and continually into the future. And so when we talk about things, any of these applications of AAM, in my case, sensing, perception, and autonomous systems, I don't need to find customers of a future that looks more like the flying cars that maybe won't be here for a while, because there's customer base that exists already in the market, and so from large commercial aircraft manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus to kind of the equivalent of a tier 1 supplier, Honeywell, Collins, these are all potential customers that have products and aircraft that we all fly in our daily lives that can benefit from those solutions. And they all have an eye towards the future. They know where the industry trends are, where the challenges are. But they're also very focused, like any corporation, on what are the near-term market opportunities and what are the challenges to the current market I'm in. Pilot shortage is something that's continued to plague the commercial aviation space, particularly after COVID. There were a lot of kind of voluntary and early retirements that caused that, but now we're seeing demand for commercial transportation be as high as it was pre-COVID pandemic. And what are the solutions for serving the demand of the market today, while also understanding that there's going to be increased demands in terms of piloting aircraft as new solutions come on board. And so that leads me kind of maybe to the last sector. I mean, there are a lot of companies, Ben mentioned Joby, in the AAM space, new hypersonic vehicles, and they all have an eye towards the problems that are plaguing the industry today, because they're not going to go away when their aircraft enter service. And so an exciting thing is the ability to engage with customers kind of rooted in the near term, but also with an eye towards the future. And that's kind of the pursuit that we've gone down as we've developed and refined our technology.
I think Electra's actual customer, like from a business standpoint, are Part 135 operators, which basically means existing airline operators, things like that. The end user, I think, is a little bit more interesting, because for a lot of the advanced air mobility aircraft, even though us as potential future passengers or cargo that would go on our aircraft may not be like who we're selling to, because our customer would offer that service using our airplane. The reason that all of us in the room are important to the advanced air mobility conversation as pseudo customers is because community acceptance of those AAM type of aircraft, that's going to be super important. If people aren't comfortable with aircraft, whether or not they're, let's say they're quiet and they're environmentally friendly, et cetera, if they're thinking of it being a helicopter or some big loud airplane, and so they prevent or stop the ability for infrastructure and operations to happen closer to where we all live, that could kill a lot of the potential advancement of the at least passenger and cargo side of advanced air mobility. So while our customers are technically airline operators, we have a second set of stakeholders, I'd say, which are the people that we'd be transporting one day. As far as where Michigan can help in that, I think there's a lot, at least within sort of the whole of government approach, to create those conversations. This is a good starting point, right? But there's, I think, a lot bigger venues that could also be leveraged to get those, help communities understand what these new types of aircraft can offer, so that we can be engaging with our stakeholders to make sure that as we try and roll out new technologies, that we're also being mindful of how the community thinks about them and how we can integrate them into today's life.
We have two personas of our system. Think of it as, and it's a flywheel. So you have the operators and managers that fly drones. We have about 18,000 pilots in our platform. So we get to see as a company, what are they flying drones over there for? And what's that? And we'll get calls, oh yeah, we're a chicken farm. We use drones to keep the hawks away. I'm like, okay. Or we count deer, in our field for municipality. We use drones as first responders. We use drones, I was on the call with NYPD 2 weeks ago. We're working with them. And then we're on the call working. It's like, yeah, we just used a drone to pull 2 people out of the river with life preservers. I was like, that's a cool package delivery system. So I get to hear these really neat stories that are all over the place every day. And we kind of take it for granted as a company like that. So that's our first set. But once you get so far, linear inspection over 80 miles. How do you do that? Well, you need a much larger system, and that's really expensive. And then you get into packaged or medical delivery. And when you start to go into those beyond visual line of sights, that kicks in our second customer. That is governments. That's the federal governments and the systems to make sure that they're putting in the right policies and systems and a tool to access the airspace. And then also giving customers access to radar systems and communication networks that allows them to apply for waivers to the FAA to approve them within the system. So that is our administrators, our directors, and our planners. It's almost like ground transportation has a planning system. You have to do the same thing when you start to run bigger operations. How do you permit your takeoff and landing location? What is the configuration? What's the sound area? What are you allowed to fly over based on your type of operation or your ConOps? And how is the community with it? Do they have an integration? So our busiest customer is kind of changed for us is actually cities right now. Cities are buying so many drones, and they're using them for police and roof inspections and things like that. So our persona right now is trying to keep up with cities, making them compliant, and then provide that data out to the residents and businesses to do the advanced capability. So that's what we're seeing in our world right now. So.
And our customer is entirely different than anybody else here. Our customers operate wind farms. They know nothing about drones. They don't operate the drones. We actually maintain the operations. Our delivery to the customer is action items. It's here's what you do with your wind farm next. They don't care about the drone. They don't even care about the raw data from the drone. They just care to know, what do I do to make my life easier on running a wind farm? And I think the interesting parallel there to all the other industries is we right now in the current state of this advanced air mobility, we're very much talking about the end operator also being the end customer of like physically using a system or building a system. But yet I bet most of you in this room are not drone operators. I bet a lot of you have benefited from small aircraft drones, whether it's delivery or whatnot, as an end customer, but you actually probably don't care so much about the technology that we're all talking about up here. But you don't even necessarily realize how it's impacting daily life. And I think that is separating who the end benefactor is of this technology versus maybe the middle person that's operating versus the technology creators. I think that entire value chain needs to be better understood on all of these industries. Our customers are shocked when we tell them we've taken off and landed 350,000 times. And yet they never see the drone. They're not in the farm when we're doing the work for them. They just get an email that says, here's what you got to do next. But I think that's going to have an even bigger impact across industries we can't even think about yet. And we aren't even talking on this stage about like low Earth orbit satellites. You mentioned up to 65,000 feet, but it even goes higher than that. Or one of you said it for you, yeah. And so I think there's a lot of applications here where that end user actually never even sees the technology at all.
Thank you, gentlemen. I would like to open it up to the audience. We have time, I think, to take one, maybe two questions. So if you have a question and you want to raise your hand.
Hey guys, thanks for organizing this panel. It's cool to see AAM session as one of the first panels in a mobility summit. I'm a professor in aerospace at University of Michigan. I just moved from Carnegie Mellon to here exactly to establish the kind of things that you guys are talking about. So I think there's a lot that is going on here that's super positive. I evaluated all of the options, both West Coast schools and other schools that are well positioned in aerospace. I think Michigan is uniquely positioned here. I want to present a hypothesis and would love to hear your thoughts. If you look at what is happening with electrification in aerospace, one interesting thing is the volumes of the future electrified aircrafts are looking a lot like automotive, looking a lot like a premium line of an automotive. So if you look at the Joby announcement yesterday, right, they're going to produce 500 aircrafts a year, right? That's about the capability of the largest aircraft makers today, right? And so the interesting thing is that aviation is going to look a lot like automotive, and so for the GMs and the Stellantis and Ford, a luxury line, they can open up a luxury line for an aircraft maker and produce all the volume needed to service the advanced air mobility. And I think Michigan, in that sense, is uniquely positioned to be one of the leaders here. So I'd love thoughts from the panel on how this could play out.
I'll go first. So absolutely the case. There are certainly some auto OEMs that are already very heavily invested in some of these companies. Joby, the example that we used, Toyota's dumped several hundreds of millions into Joby. Stellantis has a big stake in Archer. Haven't seen many moves yet from Ford or GM in terms of like the big OEMs that are in the state, but there's a lot of opportunity. I think they're kind of waiting to see how the industry plays out before making a more aggressive move. But what Venkat mentioned, the bridging of maybe a few tens or maybe a couple hundred airplanes a year, which is like what aviation is used to, versus millions of cars a year, which is what auto can do. There's this gap between the two where this is where some of the new manufacturing, I think, opportunity is, where you can take the lessons learned from automotive and apply it to the much more old school, slower way of doing it in aviation, and start something new in the state. So I think that's definitely going to happen. And to be Venkat's cheerleader a little bit here, he and I are a bit of co-conspirators, if you will, on trying to start up an ecosystem in the state. So go meet him. He's arguably the world's leading expert on aviation batteries, and he came to the University of Michigan partly because of the state's big investment, the $130 million in the EV battery center that's being developed up at the College of Engineering. So as we talked about Joby and how to win or start up a new ecosystem here, those state investments can absolutely do really big things in terms of bringing the top talent from out of the state and creating ecosystems, and people like Venkat are leading the way in that. So definitely have a chat with Venkat while you're here.
And I should give a shout out because I'm probably the only one from Eastern Michigan up here. So shout out to Eastern Michigan. I'm proud of being an Eastern grad and right down the street as well. So just one point that a couple weeks ago, the new FAA administrator that's been nominated comes from Advanced Air Mobility. So that's a pretty big deal. Traditional air traffic control system, FAA, an older style industry, has the COO of, I forget the name of the company, but coming as the nominee for the Supernal. Yep. So that's a big deal when it comes to that. And then the things that are going on in Michigan, there's some things lining up to help support that, and then the infrastructure and systems to support that large amount of operators will be interesting at low, takeoff landings and routes and stuff like that. So there's an investment going in.
I'll say too, I'm really impressed with the state's enthusiasm, state and local enthusiasm over aerospace as a potential new area of growth. I think that is new in the last 1 year, maybe 2 years, something we haven't seen before. So there's a incredible hunger to learn at the state level. And actually, I think I saw Justine Johnson, the new Chief Mobility Officer, in the back. Quick shout out to Justine. So she comes from similarly the West Coast, big background in mobility, but she's also been recently serving on the Los Angeles Aviation Commission. And so I think that's a really cool perspective to add to the state as she then goes off and thinks about how to bring some of these new mobility areas to the state. So I know you'll be hearing from Justine soon enough, but I'm excited for her to be here on the Team Michigan.
I'll maybe just tack onto the conversation because we're just about out here, but I think it goes beyond even electrification. Danny mentioned the auto industry has curated a workforce and technology around automation, sensors, software development. That's here in Michigan, and I think a similar analogy can be made where these new and existing aircraft are all going to need additional technology and sophistication on board. Aside from the manufacturing and how does the vehicle look, how does it operate, and there's an equally ripe opportunity to leverage what's already in place here in the state as well. And thanks Ann Arbor Spark for pulling this together, as well as the kind of the kickoff panel for the Mobility Summit. I came here last year, and there wasn't a lot in aviation, so it's really nice to see how quickly that kind of narrative has already changed, and have everybody here participate in the conversation.
Thanks. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you.